The figure touched my 12-year-old daughter's shoulder and whispered, 24 hours. I was the only one who could see her, and in 8 years working the ER, every single patient she touched died exactly when she promised. My name is Jessica Turner. 43 hours ago, I thought I was having a complete psychological breakdown. 36 hours ago, I discovered the horrifying truth about my family bloodline. And 12 hours ago, I had to choose between my daughter's life and continuing a legacy of death that stretches back over a century. The woman who visits our hospital isn't a hallucination. She's my great-great-grandmother, Nurse Abigail Crane, who murdered hundreds of patients in the 1890s and has been recruiting family members to continue her work ever since. Emma was supposed to die from a simple appendectomy. The surgery was routine. Her recovery was perfect. But when I saw Abigail standing beside her hospital bed, reaching out to mark her for death, I realized that some family traditions are worth destroying everything to stop. This is the story of how I discovered that death runs in my family, how our hospital was built specifically to harvest souls, and how I had to fight my own ancestor's ghost to save my child's life. But I need to warn you, what I learned about the patients who die unexpectedly in hospitals will make you question every medical death you've ever trusted. Because sometimes, the angel of death doesn't come from heaven. Sometimes, she's been working the night shift for over 100 years. Before I tell you about the night I saw death herself marking patients for collection, you need to understand who I am and why my word matters. My name is Jessica Turner, and I'm an ER nurse at Mercy General Hospital in Portland, Oregon. I've been working emergency medicine for 8 years. I've seen every kind of trauma, every type of medical emergency, every way a human being can die. I'm also a single mother to Emma, my 12-year-old daughter. Emma is my entire world. Smart, funny, the kind of kid who wants to be a doctor when she grows up, because she thinks hospitals are places where miracles happen. I used to think that too. I'm not someone who believes in supernatural things. My background is in critical care nursing and trauma medicine. I believe in what I can measure, monitor, and treat, with evidence-based protocols. When patients die in the ER, there are medical reasons. Heart failure, massive trauma, septic shock, causes I can understand and document. I've never been religious, never been superstitious, never believed in ghosts or premonitions, or any kind of paranormal activity. If you'd asked me 3 weeks ago about angels or demons or spirits, I would have referred you to the psychiatric department, but I should have paid more attention to my family history. My mother died when I was 16. Cancer, supposedly. But before she died, she kept talking about seeing a woman in old-fashioned nurse's clothing standing in her hospital room. She said the woman would whisper things to her about other patients, about who would live and who would die. The doctor said it was hallucinations from the morphine. My father said it was the tumor affecting her brain. I believed them because I needed to believe that death was random, that medicine was logical, that hospitals were safe places where trained professionals saved lives. I was wrong about everything. Mercy General Hospital has been serving Portland for over 130 years. It was built in 1891 as the Portland Mercy Asylum for the mentally infirm. Back then, it wasn't a hospital. It was a place where families sent relatives they couldn't handle, where society locked away people who were different, difficult, or inconvenient. The asylum had a reputation for being progressive, humane, even merciful, which is how it got its name. Patients died there, of course, but supposedly from natural causes, from the illnesses that had brought them there in the first place. What I didn't know, what nobody talks about, is that the asylum's most celebrated nurse was a woman named Abigail Crane. She was known for her compassion, her dedication to easing suffering, her almost supernatural ability to comfort dying patients in their final moments. Abigail Crane was my great-great-grandmother, and 3 weeks ago, she came back to work. I need to tell you what happened because Emma is safe now, but other people's children aren't. Other patients in other hospitals aren't. Because what I learned about Abigail, about our family, about the real purpose of Mercy General, is still happening, and it could be happening anywhere. The first time I saw her, I thought she was just another nurse I didn't recognize. October 3rd, 2023. It was a Tuesday night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'd been working ER for 6 months at Mercy General after transferring from Providence Medical Center. The move was for Emma. Better schools in the area, lower cost of living, a chance to be closer to extended family. The ER was moderately busy that night. Nothing unusual. A few car accident victims, an elderly man with chest pain, a teenager who'd overdosed on his mother's prescription medications. Standard Tuesday night trauma. Around 2:30 a.m., we got a call from the ambulance service. Elderly male, 73 years old, found down in his apartment by a neighbor. Probable heart attack, but conscious and responsive. When they brought Harold Morrison into our trauma bay, he was stable. His vitals were within normal limits for his age and condition. His EKG showed some irregularities, but nothing immediately life-threatening. Dr. Sarah Chen, our attending that night, ordered standard cardiac protocols and admitted him for observation. "Looks like we caught this one early," Dr. Chen told me as we got Harold settled into a monitoring bed. "He should be fine with some medication adjustments and rest." Harold was awake, alert, even chatty. He told me about his cat, how worried he was that nobody would feed her while he was in the hospital. He asked me to call his neighbor to make sure she was okay. "I'll be fine, won't I, nurse?" he asked me around 3 a.m. "This isn't serious, is it?" "You're in good hands, Mr. Morrison," I told him. "Dr. Chen is excellent, and your numbers look much better than when you came in." And that's when I saw her. Standing beside Harold's bed was a woman I didn't recognize. She was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned nurse's uniform. Long white dress, white cap, the kind you see in historical photos from the early 1900s. She appeared to be in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back severely and pale, almost translucent skin. What struck me immediately was how out of place she looked. Modern hospitals don't use those uniforms. Nobody dresses like that anymore. But she was standing there as naturally as if she belonged, looking down at Harold with what seemed like professional assessment. I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing things. Night shifts can play tricks on your eyes, especially when you're adjusting to a new workplace. But when I looked again, she was still there. The woman reached out and placed her hand on Harold's shoulder. Harold didn't react. He kept talking to me about his cat as if nothing was happening. Then the woman looked directly at me and spoke in a voice that was clear, professional, but somehow ancient. "Tomorrow at noon, his heart will stop, and he will not be revived." I felt ice run through my veins. "Excuse me?" But when I looked again, she was gone. Completely gone, as if she'd never been there. I looked around the ER. Dr. Chen was with another patient. The other nurses were busy with their own cases. Nobody seemed to have seen the woman in the old-fashioned uniform. "Mr. Morrison," I said carefully. "Did you see anyone else here just now? Another nurse?" Harold looked confused. "Just you, dear. Why?" I convinced myself it was fatigue, stress from the new job, maybe a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. I finished Harold's care, documented his vitals, and tried to forget about the strange woman. But I kept checking on Harold throughout the night. Every time I walked past his room, I expected to see her again. I didn't. Harold's condition remained stable for the rest of my shift. When I left at 7 a.m., his vitals were good, he was comfortable, and the day nurse told me he'd probably be discharged by afternoon. I went home, got Emma ready for school, and tried to sleep. But I kept thinking about the woman, about what she'd said. Tomorrow at noon. At 12:15 p.m., while I was sleeping, my phone rang. It was Dr. Chen. "Jessica, I'm sorry to wake you, but I wanted to let you know that Harold Morrison passed away about 15 minutes ago. Sudden cardiac arrest. We tried to resuscitate him, but he didn't respond." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "What time did it happen?" "Right around noon." It was very sudden. He was talking to his daughter on the phone 1 minute, and the next minute he was in full arrest. Sometimes these things happen with elderly cardiac patients. After I hung up, I sat in my bedroom staring at the wall. Harold Morrison had died at exactly noon, just as the mysterious woman had predicted. I told myself it was a coincidence. Heart patients die unexpectedly all the time. The timing was just a bizarre coincidence, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself, because the woman had looked at me like she knew I could see her. She had spoken to me directly, confidently, as if she expected me to understand exactly what she was telling me, and she had been absolutely right. I spent the next 3 days before my next shift researching everything I could about visual hallucinations, stress-induced psychosis, and sleep deprivation symptoms. I convinced myself that starting a new job, adjusting to a new city, and managing single parenthood had finally caught up with me. I made an appointment with my doctor, started taking vitamins, began drinking less coffee and getting more sleep. But none of that mattered, because 4 nights later, during my next shift, she came back, and this time, she wasn't visiting an elderly cardiac patient. This time, she was standing beside a 7-year-old girl. October 7th, 2023. Another night shift, but this time I was prepared. I'd gotten good sleep, eaten properly, limited my caffeine intake. I was convinced that whatever I'd seen the previous week was just a stress-induced hallucination that wouldn't happen again. Around 1 a.m., the ambulance brought in a family from a car accident. Minor injuries mostly, a few cuts and bruises, some whiplash. But the youngest victim, 7-year-old Lily Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, had hit her head against the car window and was experiencing some confusion and nausea. Dr. Rodriguez ordered a CT scan to rule out any brain injury, but Lily's symptoms were mild. She was awake, responsive, asking for her mommy. Her vital signs were perfect. The CT scan came back normal. "Looks like a very mild concussion," Dr. Rodriguez told Lily's parents. "We'll keep her for observation tonight, but she should be fine to go home tomorrow." Lily was admitted to our pediatric observation area, a section of the ER specifically designed for children who need monitoring but aren't seriously ill. It's one of the more cheerful parts of our department, with colorful murals and child-sized furniture. I was assigned to check on Lily every hour. Around 3 a.m., I went to take her vital signs and make sure she was comfortable. That's when I saw the woman again. Same old-fashioned nurse's uniform. Same pale skin and severe expression. But this time, she was standing beside a child's bed, looking down at a little girl who was sleeping peacefully. My first instinct was to call security, to alert someone that there was an unauthorized person in the pediatric area. But before I could move, the woman looked directly at me with the same knowing expression I remembered from Harold Morrison's room. 18 hours, she said calmly, as if she were giving me a routine report. Brain hemorrhage. Sudden and unexpected. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Lily's forehead, the same gentle gesture I'd seen her make with Harold. "Hey," I said, stepping forward. "What are you doing?" But again, she was gone. Vanished as if she'd never been there. Lily stirred in her sleep but didn't wake up. Her monitors showed normal vital signs. There was no indication that anyone had touched her or that anything unusual had happened. This time, I didn't keep quiet. I immediately went to find Dr. Rodriguez, who was reviewing charts at the nurse's station. "Dr. Rodriguez, I need to report something. There was someone in Lily Chen's room just now, a woman I don't recognize, wearing an old-style nurse's uniform." "Doctor?" Rodriguez looked up from his charts with concern. "Someone unauthorized? Did you call security?" She disappeared before I could. "But Dr. Rodriguez, she said something about Lily having a brain hemorrhage in 18 hours. Dr. Rodriguez's expression shifted from concern to confusion. "Jessica, Lily's CT scan was completely normal. There's no indication of any brain injury beyond a very mild concussion. I know that. But this woman, she seemed to know something we don't. What woman? Did anyone else see her? I realized I was in dangerous territory. I'm not sure. She was gone so quickly. Dr. Rodriguez studied me carefully. Jessica, are you feeling all right? You've seemed a bit stressed since you started here. I'm fine. I just think we should keep a very close eye on Lily. We're already monitoring her closely. But Jessica, if you're having experiences that are concerning you, maybe you should talk to someone. The hospital has employee assistance programs. I could see where this conversation was heading. In the medical field, if you start talking about seeing people who aren't there, about receiving supernatural medical predictions, you get referred for psychiatric evaluation. I'm fine, Dr. Rodriguez, just being cautious. But I wasn't fine. For the rest of my shift, I checked on Lily every 15 minutes instead of every hour. I reviewed her monitors constantly. I looked for any sign that her condition might be deteriorating. Lily remained stable throughout the night. Her parents stayed with her, and she was scheduled to be discharged the following afternoon. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I went home but couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the woman had said. 18 hours. Brain hemorrhage. 18 hours from 3 a.m. would be 9 p.m. that evening. I spent the day in a state of anxiety I'd never experienced before. I called the hospital twice to check on Lily's condition. Both times I was told she was doing well and would likely be discharged on schedule. At 8:30 p.m., I was helping Emma with her homework when my phone rang. It was Dr. Rodriguez. Jessica, I wanted to call you about Lily Chen. She's being rushed into emergency surgery right now. My blood went cold. What happened? She was getting ready to go home when she suddenly collapsed. CT scan shows a massive brain hemorrhage, something called a delayed traumatic aneurysm rupture. It's extremely rare, especially in children. We had no way to predict it. What time did it happen? About 20 minutes ago, around 9:10 p.m. 18 hours and 10 minutes after the woman had made her prediction. Is she going to be okay? Dr. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. It's very serious, Jessica. Dr. Patterson is our best neurosurgeon, but these cases are difficult. And Lily Chen died during surgery at 11:47 p.m. When Dr. Rodriguez called to tell me, I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at the clock, knowing what he was going to say before he said it. I've never seen anything like it, he told me. A delayed hemorrhage this severe, in a child with such a minor initial injury. It's almost like something was just waiting to happen. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen until dawn, trying to process what I'd witnessed. 2 patients, 2 exact predictions. 2 deaths that happened precisely when the mysterious woman said they would. I could no longer dismiss this as coincidence or hallucination, but I also couldn't tell anyone what was really happening. Because in the medical field, if you start claiming you can predict patient deaths through supernatural visions, you don't just get referred for psychiatric evaluation. You get fired. And Emma and I couldn't afford for me to lose my job, so I made a decision that would haunt me for the next 2 weeks. I decided to keep watching, keep documenting, and try to understand what was happening. What I didn't realize was that the woman wasn't just predicting deaths. She was choosing them. And I was about to discover that her choices weren't random. After Lily Chen's death, I became obsessed with understanding what was happening to me. I spent every free moment researching everything I could about supernatural experiences in medical settings, about nurses who claimed to see death coming, about hospitals with unexplained phenomena. But more than that, I started paying attention to every detail of my work environment. I studied the other nurses, watched for anyone else who might be seeing what I was seeing. I researched the history of Mercy General, looking for any explanation for these impossible predictions. What I found made everything worse. During my research into the hospital's history, I discovered that Mercy General had been built on the site of the original Portland Mercy Asylum for the mentally infirm. The asylum had operated from 1891 to 1923 when it was converted into a general hospital. The asylum's records were archived at the Portland Historical Society. It took me 3 days to get permission to access them, but when I did, I found something that made my blood run cold. Nurse Abigail Crane had worked at the asylum from 1889 until her death in 1923. She was celebrated in local newspapers as the Angel of Mercy, known for her extraordinary compassion and her ability to provide comfort to dying patients. But there was something disturbing about the death rates during Abigail's tenure. According to the asylum's records, the mortality rate among patients increased by nearly 40% during the years Abigail worked there. Patients who should have recovered from minor ailments died unexpectedly. Patients with chronic but manageable conditions suffered sudden, fatal complications. The asylum's administrators never questioned these deaths because Abigail was always present to provide comfort in patients' final moments. She would report that patients had passed peacefully, that they had seemed to accept their fate, that their deaths appeared to be natural progressions of their illnesses. But when I cross-referenced the death records with Abigail's work schedule, a pattern emerged that made me sick to my stomach. Every single unexplained death at the asylum occurred during Abigail's shifts. Every single patient who died unexpectedly had been under Abigail's direct care in the hours before their death. And in many cases, other staff members noted that Abigail had predicted these deaths with uncanny accuracy, sometimes days in advance. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Abigail Crane hadn't been an angel of mercy. She had been an angel of death. But the most chilling discovery came when I found a letter from 1922, written by Dr. Edmund Hartwell, the asylum's head physician. The letter was addressed to the board of directors and marked confidential. In the letter, Dr. Hartwell expressed his growing concerns about Nurse Crane's methods. He wrote, "While I cannot prove any wrongdoing, I have become increasingly troubled by the coincidences surrounding Nurse Crane's patient care. Her ability to predict patient deaths with such precision suggests either supernatural insight or something far more sinister. I have observed her speaking to dying patients in their final moments, but when questioned, she claims to be offering spiritual comfort. However, several times I have noticed that patients under her care deteriorate rapidly after these conversations, often in ways that seem inconsistent with their medical conditions." Dr. Hartwell's letter concluded with a recommendation that Nurse Crane be transferred to different duties, away from direct patient care. But Abigail Crane died of influenza just 2 weeks after Dr. Hartwell wrote that letter. According to the death certificate, she died suddenly, despite being a healthy woman in her early 50s. According to the records, Dr. Hartwell himself treated her during her final illness. The letter was never sent. Reading this historical account, I realized I was dealing with something far more dangerous than supernatural predictions. I was dealing with a woman who had murdered patients for over 30 years and had somehow found a way to continue her work from beyond the grave. But I still didn't understand why I could see her, why she was communicating with me specifically. That answer came when I decided to research my own family history. My mother had been born Jessica Crane Turner. Crane. I am Abigail Crane's great-great-granddaughter. When I realized this connection, everything clicked into place. The woman I was seeing wasn't just some random spirit haunting the hospital. She was family. And based on what I'd learned about her methods at the asylum, she wasn't just predicting deaths. She was recruiting me. That night, I went to work with a new understanding of what was happening. I wasn't experiencing hallucinations or supernatural predictions. I was being trained. Abigail appeared twice during my shift that night. First beside an elderly woman with pneumonia. 3 days. Respiratory failure. Then beside a middle-aged man with diabetes complications. Tomorrow evening. Cardiac arrest. Both patients were stable when she made these predictions. Both patients died exactly when she said they would. And each time, she looked at me with increasing approval, as if I were a student who was finally beginning to understand the lesson. After the second death, she stayed visible longer than usual. Instead of disappearing immediately, she walked over to where I was standing and spoke directly to me. "You see now," she said, in that calm, professional voice. "You understand what we do." "What who does?" I whispered, terrified that someone would see me talking to empty air. "The women of our bloodline. We ease suffering. We decide when pain should end. We choose mercy over prolonged agony. You're killing people. I'm preventing suffering, just as my grandmother did before me, just as her grandmother did before her. This gift has been in our family for generations. I don't want any part of this." Abigail's expression shifted from approval to disappointment. "You will learn, child. You will understand that medicine sometimes requires choices that others cannot make. And when you do, you will take your place in our family's work. Never." "We shall see," she said, and disappeared. The next morning, I came home to find Emma complaining of stomach pain. "It's probably nothing, Mom," she said. "Maybe something I ate at school." But the pain got worse throughout the day. By evening, Emma was doubled over in agony. I rushed her to the emergency room at Mercy General. Dr. Rodriguez examined her and ordered tests. "Looks like appendicitis," he told me. "We need to get her into surgery tonight." "But she'll be fine, right? It's routine surgery?" "Absolutely. Dr. Patterson is our best surgeon. Emma will be home in a few days." The surgery went perfectly. Emma's appendix was removed without complications, and she was moved to the pediatric recovery unit to rest. I stayed with her through the night, holding her hand while she slept, grateful that my daughter was safe. At 3 a.m., while Emma was sleeping peacefully, Abigail Crane appeared beside her bed. She looked down at my daughter with the same professional assessment I'd seen her give to every other patient. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Emma's shoulder. 24 hours, she said, looking directly at me. "Unless you choose to join us." That's when I understood. Emma wasn't sick. She was bait. And I was about to discover that some family legacies are worth dying to destroy. When Abigail touched Emma's shoulder and gave her 24 hours to live, I felt something break inside my mind. Not just fear, though the terror was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This was deeper. This was the complete collapse of everything I thought I understood about reality, about family, about the nature of life and death itself. "Please," I whispered, not caring if anyone saw me talking to what appeared to be empty air. "She's just a child. She's my child." Abigail's expression remained professionally detached. So were many of the children I helped at the asylum. Their suffering was brief because I chose mercy over prolonged agony. Emma isn't suffering. She's recovering perfectly from routine surgery. "She will suffer," Abigail said calmly. "Post-surgical complications are common. Infections, blood clots, organ failure. So many ways a simple appendectomy can turn tragic. Unless, of course, someone with medical knowledge intervenes to prevent that suffering." I realized what she was saying. Emma was going to develop complications because Abigail was going to cause them. "What do you want from me?" "Accept your heritage. Join our family's work. Help me ease the suffering of patients who are clinging to life when they should be released to peace." "And if I refuse?" "Then Emma will experience every moment of fear and pain that death can bring. Her young body will fight desperately against the inevitable, and she will suffer greatly before she finds peace." I looked at my daughter sleeping in the hospital bed, recovery going perfectly, completely unaware that her life had just been threatened by her own great-great-great-grandmother. "How long do I have to decide?" 24 hours, Abigail repeated. "When I return tomorrow night, you will either begin your training, or Emma will begin her journey to the other side." Then she disappeared, leaving me alone with the most impossible choice any mother could face. For the next 6 hours, I sat beside Emma's bed in a state of complete psychological chaos. I couldn't leave her alone. What if Abigail returned early? But I also couldn't tell anyone what was happening. How do you explain to a doctor that your daughter is being threatened by your dead ancestor? How do you tell hospital security that a ghost is planning to murder your child? When Dr. Rodriguez came to check on Emma during his morning rounds, I tried to express my concerns without sounding completely insane. "Doctor, I'm worried about post-surgical complications. Could we run additional tests? Maybe keep her longer for observation?" "Jessica, Emma's recovery is textbook perfect. Her vitals are excellent. Her incision is healing beautifully, and she's showing no signs of infection or other complications. But sometimes things can go wrong quickly, right? Blood clots, infections." Dr. Rodriguez sat down beside me with a concerned expression. "Jessica, I know you're worried because you're her mother, but also because you're a nurse who's seen complications before. But Emma is genuinely fine. Could we just run a few more tests? A blood panel, maybe a CT scan?" "Jessica, unnecessary testing isn't good medical practice. Emma is ready to go home this afternoon." That's when I realized I was completely alone in this situation. The medical establishment couldn't help me because they couldn't see the threat. Security couldn't protect Emma because they couldn't see the danger. And I couldn't explain the truth without being committed for psychiatric evaluation. I spent the day researching everything I could find about combating supernatural threats, about protecting people from ghostly attacks, about breaking family curses. Most of what I found was folklore and superstition, but some sources suggested that spirits are bound by the same emotional and psychological patterns they had in life. If Abigail had been a controlling, manipulative person who used her medical knowledge to hurt people, then maybe she could be fought using those same psychological tactics. But I also realized something else. I needed help from someone who might understand supernatural threats. I called Father Michael Santos, the chaplain at Mercy General. I'd met him a few times during my shifts when families needed spiritual support. "Father Santos, this is Jessica Turner, one of the ER nurses. I need to ask you about something that might sound strange." "Of course, Jessica. What's troubling you? Do you believe that people who die with unfinished business can sometimes return?" There was a pause. "Are you asking about spiritual visitations?" "I'm asking about someone who died but continues to interact with the living. Someone who might be using that interaction to harm people." "Jessica, are you experiencing something that's frightening you?" I decided to risk everything and tell him the truth. "Father, I've been seeing the spirit of a nurse who worked here over 100 years ago. She's been predicting patient deaths with perfect accuracy. And now she's threatening my daughter." Another pause. "Jessica, would you like me to come speak with you in person?" "Yes. But Father, I need you to understand. This isn't a psychological crisis. This is real. And my daughter has less than 18 hours to live unless I find a way to stop it." Father Santos arrived at the hospital within an hour. He found me in Emma's room, where I was maintaining a constant vigil. "Tell me everything," he said. I told him about Abigail Crane, about the historical records, about the pattern of deaths, about the ultimatum I'd been given. I expected him to suggest psychiatric counseling or medication. Instead, he listened carefully and then said, "I believe you." "You do?" "I've been a hospital chaplain for 15 years. I've seen things that can't be explained by medicine or psychology. And I've read the historical records about this hospital's previous incarnation as an asylum. There have always been unexplained phenomena here. Can you help me protect Emma?" "I can try. But Jessica, if what you're describing is accurate, then we're dealing with a spirit who has been influencing life and death decisions for over a century. That kind of spiritual power isn't easily overcome. What are my options? You could accept her offer and try to subvert her influence from within, or you could refuse and fight her directly. What would fighting her directly involve? Spiritual warfare, prayer, holy water, direct confrontation. But Jessica, The risk to Emma would be enormous. If Abigail has the power to cause medical complications, she could kill Emma instantly if she feels threatened. I realized I was facing an impossible choice between two potentially fatal options: accept Abigail's offer and become a murderer like her, or refuse and watch my daughter die. There might be a third option, Father Santos said after a long moment. What? If Abigail is bound to this hospital because of unfinished business, then maybe we can give her what she needs to move on. Maybe we can help her find peace without requiring you to continue her work. What kind of unfinished business? You said Dr. Hartwell suspected her of wrongdoing, but died before he could expose her. Maybe Abigail needs acknowledgement of her crimes. Maybe she needs confession and absolution. As Father Santos spoke, I realized there might be hope, but I also realized that time was running out. Emma had 12 hours left, and Abigail Crane was about to return for my answer. At 11 p.m., exactly 24 hours after Abigail had marked Emma for death, I was ready for the most important conversation of my life. Father Santos and I had spent the day preparing. We'd researched spiritual protection rituals, gathered blessed objects, and most importantly, we'd developed a psychological strategy based on what we knew about Abigail's personality and motivations. Emma was sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed, still recovering beautifully from her appendectomy. Her vital signs were perfect, but I knew that could change in an instant if our plan failed. At exactly 11 p.m., the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Abigail Crane materialized beside Emma's bed, looking exactly as she had 24 hours earlier. Professional, detached, ready to collect what she considered hers. "Your time is up, child," she said, placing her hand on Emma's shoulder. "What is your decision?" Father Santos couldn't see her, but he could feel her presence. He began praying quietly, holding a small cross and a vial of holy water. "I want to talk first," I said, standing between Abigail and Emma's bed. "Before I give you my answer, I want to understand something." Abigail's eyebrows raised slightly. "What could you possibly need to understand?" "Dr. Hartwell knew what you were doing, didn't he? At the asylum, he knew you were killing patients." For the first time since I'd been seeing her, Abigail's professional composure flickered. "Dr. Hartwell was a weak man who couldn't make the difficult decisions that mercy requires. He was going to expose you. That's why he died so conveniently, isn't it? Right after he wrote that letter to the board of directors. Dr. Hartwell died of influenza. While under your care, how many people did you murder, Abigail? How many patients died because you decided their suffering should end?" Abigail's form began to shimmer with what looked like anger. "I saved those people from prolonged agony. I gave them peace. You gave them death without their consent. You played God with human lives. And you will continue that work, or your daughter will join the patients I helped find peace." That's when I realized something crucial about Abigail's psychology. She genuinely believed she had been doing good work. In her mind, she was a mercy killer, not a murderer. She had spent over a century justifying her actions to herself. But there was something else, something I'd noticed in all our interactions. Abigail was lonely. For over 100 years, she had been carrying out what she believed was important work, but she had been doing it alone. She wanted me to join her, not just because I was family, but because she needed validation, companionship, someone to share her burden. "You've been alone all this time, haven't you?" I said, changing my tone from confrontational to sympathetic. "A century of making these decisions by yourself." Abigail's anger flickered into something that looked almost like relief. "You understand. I understand that you believe you were helping people. But Abigail, times have changed. Medicine has changed. We can manage pain now in ways you never could at the asylum. We can provide comfort without ending life. Pain is still pain. Suffering is still suffering. But now we have choices you didn't have. Palliative care, pain management, hospice services that actually comfort people instead of killing them. I could see uncertainty creeping into Abigail's expression. "What if there was another way for you to find peace?" I continued. "What if you could rest without requiring me to continue killing people?" "There is no rest for our family. This is our burden and our gift. Dr. Hartwell suspected what you were doing, but he never got to expose the truth. You've been carrying that secret for over a century. What if you could finally confess? What if you could acknowledge what really happened and find forgiveness?" Father Santos, following our planned script, stepped forward. "Abigail Crane, I am Father Michael Santos. I offer you the opportunity for confession and absolution." Abigail turned toward Father Santos with surprise. "You can see me?" "I can feel your presence," Father Santos said. "And I can offer you what you've needed for over 100 years, the chance to confess your sins and find peace." For the first time since I'd been seeing her, Abigail looked uncertain, vulnerable. "I helped them," she whispered. "I ended their suffering." "You killed them," I said gently. "And you've been carrying that guilt for over a century, justifying it as mercy, but knowing deep down that it was murder." Abigail's form began to flicker, as if her spiritual energy was becoming unstable. I thought I was helping." "You were helping yourself," Father Santos said. "You were taking control in situations where you felt powerless. But that's not mercy. That's playing God." Suddenly, Abigail's composure collapsed entirely. The professional nurse facade disappeared, and what remained was a woman who had been carrying enormous guilt for over a century. "I couldn't stop," she sobbed, her voice becoming more human, more broken. "Once I started, I couldn't stop. They suffered, and I had the power to end that suffering. But I began to enjoy that power. I began to choose who lived and who died based on my own judgment, not theirs." "How many?" Father Santos asked gently. 347. Over 34 years, I killed 347 people. The number hit me like a physical blow. Abigail wasn't just a serial killer. She was one of the most prolific murderers in American history. "I tried to stop after Dr. Hartwell became suspicious," she continued, "but I couldn't let him expose me. So I killed him too, made it look like influenza. And then I couldn't live with what I'd become." "How did you die, Abigail?" "I poisoned myself. Same method I used on my patients. I thought death would end the guilt, but it didn't. It only made me more desperate to justify what I'd done." Father Santos opened his Bible. "Abigail Crane, do you confess to the murders of 348 people?" "I confess," she whispered. "Do you acknowledge that your actions were sinful, that you took lives that were not yours to take?" "I acknowledge it." "Do you seek forgiveness for these sins?" Abigail looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed, then back at me. "I seek forgiveness, and I release my family from this burden. The killing ends with me." Father Santos began reading from his Bible, offering the ritual of confession and absolution. As he spoke, Abigail's form began to glow with a light that seemed to come from within her. "Thank you," she said to me. "Thank you for helping me find the courage to confess." Then she reached out and touched Emma's forehead one more time. But instead of the cold touch of death, this touch was warm, protective. "She will live a long, healthy life," Abigail said. "And she will never be burdened with our family's curse." Abigail Crane smiled for the first time since I'd been seeing her. Then she faded away, and I knew she was finally at peace. Emma stirred in her sleep, but her vital signs remained perfect. The temperature in the room returned to normal, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. "Is it over?" Father Santos asked. It's over, I said, holding Emma's hand. She's free. We're all free. But I was about to learn that freedom from a family curse comes with its own responsibilities. Emma made a complete recovery from her appendectomy. Better than complete. Dr. Rodriguez commented that he'd never seen a patient heal so quickly or so thoroughly from the procedure. It's like her body just decided to accelerate the healing process, he told me. I've never seen anything like it. I knew why Emma had healed so well. Abigail's final touch hadn't been a threat. It had been a blessing, a grandmother's protective gesture across 4 generations of family. But Emma's recovery was just the beginning of the changes that followed Abigail's confession and absolution. The unexplained deaths at Mercy General stopped completely. For over a century, the hospital had averaged 15 to 20 unexplained patient deaths per year. Cases where patients with good prognoses suddenly took turns for the worse, where minor conditions became fatal complications, where recovery became impossible for reasons no one could medically explain. After Abigail found peace, those deaths stopped happening. Dr. Chen, who had been working at Mercy General for 12 years, commented on it during a staff meeting. I don't know what's changed, she said, but our unexplained mortality rate has dropped to almost 0 over the past month. It's like we've become a completely different hospital. I knew exactly what had changed, but I couldn't tell my colleagues that their improved patient outcomes were the result of a century-old serial killer finally confessing her crimes. Father Santos and I developed a friendship based on our shared experience. He became someone I could talk to about the supernatural aspects of healthcare, about the spiritual dimensions of healing that medical school doesn't teach. You did something remarkable, he told me during one of our conversations. You didn't just save your daughter's life. You helped free hundreds of souls who had been victims of Abigail's crimes. How do you mean? When someone dies by murder, especially when the murder is disguised as mercy, their spirit often can't find rest. They're trapped between worlds, confused about how they died, unable to move on. When Abigail confessed to her crimes, she released all of those souls to find peace. I thought about Harold Morrison, about little Lily Chen, about all the patients who had died under Abigail's care over the past century. Are they at peace now? I believe they are. And I believe Abigail is too. But the experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I couldn't continue working as an ER nurse after everything I'd learned about the supernatural aspects of healthcare. Every time I walked into Mercy General, I was reminded of the weeks when I'd watched patients die according to a ghost's predictions. I resigned from my position and took a job as a patient advocate at a different hospital across town. In my new role, I help patients and families navigate the healthcare system, ensure they understand their treatment options, and advocate for their rights and dignity during medical treatment. But my real purpose is something I can't put on my resume. I watch for signs of supernatural influence in healthcare settings, because what I learned from Abigail Crane is that hospitals, especially older hospitals built on sites with traumatic histories, can become focal points for spiritual activity. I've since researched dozens of medical facilities across the country and found patterns that suggest Abigail wasn't unique. There are other hospitals with unexplained mortality rates, other medical facilities where patients die in ways that don't quite make medical sense. Some of these patterns can be explained by poor medical practices, inadequate staffing, or substandard care. But some of them suggest spiritual influence. I've quietly contacted other healthcare workers who have reported supernatural experiences. Nurses who see spirits in hospital corridors, doctors who receive unexplained insights about patient conditions, medical staff who witness phenomena that can't be explained by science. Most of them are afraid to talk about their experiences because they fear being labeled as mentally unstable. But I listen to their stories, and when appropriate, I connect them with people like Father Santos who can help them understand and address spiritual threats in medical settings. Emma is now 13 years old. She's healthy, happy, and has no memory of the supernatural threat that nearly killed her. She still wants to be a doctor when she grows up, but now she's interested in psychiatric medicine. I want to help people who see things that other people can't see, she told me recently. I think maybe those people aren't crazy. Maybe they're just experiencing something that science doesn't understand yet. I've never told Emma about Abigail Crane, or about our family's dark history. But sometimes I wonder if she has inherited some kind of spiritual sensitivity that will help her in her future medical career. The difference is that Emma will use any gifts she has to heal people, not to harm them. I've also learned that Abigail was right about one thing. Our family does have a legacy in healthcare. But it's not a legacy of choosing who lives and who dies. It's a legacy of protecting patients from those who would abuse medical authority. I've traced our family history back 6 generations, and found that many of the women in our bloodline have worked in healthcare. Some were healers, some were midwives, some were nurses or doctors. But the ones who were remembered, the ones who were celebrated, were the ones who advocated for patients, who stood up to authority when it was wrong, who chose to heal rather than to harm. Abigail was an aberration in our family line, not its natural expression. 6 months after Abigail found peace, I received a letter that confirmed everything I'd learned about our family's true legacy. The letter was from Dr. Patricia Morrison, a researcher studying historical medical ethics. She had been investigating unusual mortality patterns in 19th century medical institutions when she came across records of Abigail Crane. But she had also found records of another nurse from the same time period, Mary Crane, Abigail's younger sister. Mary Crane had worked at a different hospital in Portland during the same years that Abigail was at the asylum. But Mary's records told a completely different story. Mary had been known for advocating for patient rights, for questioning doctors' orders when she thought they were inappropriate, for refusing to participate in treatments she believed were harmful. Mary had been fired from 3 different hospitals for insubordination, because she wouldn't stay quiet when she witnessed medical abuse. But the patients under Mary's care had unusually good outcomes. They recovered faster, suffered fewer complications, and reported feeling more comfortable and cared for during their hospital stays. Mary Crane had died in 1898, but her legacy lived on in the form of policy changes she had advocated for, patient rights protections she had fought to establish, and medical ethics standards she had helped create. Dr. Morrison's letter concluded with a question that gave me chills. I'm wondering if you might be related to Mary Crane. Your work as a patient advocate, your commitment to protecting vulnerable patients, and your last name suggest you might be part of her family line. If so, I'd love to speak with you about continuing her research into patient advocacy and medical ethics. I called Dr. Morrison and learned that Mary Crane was my great-great-grandmother, Abigail's sister. The 2 sisters had chosen opposite paths. One had become a killer disguised as a healer. The other had become a true healer who fought against abuse and neglect. I am descended from both sisters, but I choose to follow Mary's example. Today, I work as a patient advocate, but I also serve as an unofficial consultant for healthcare workers who experience supernatural phenomena in medical settings. I help them understand that not all spiritual experiences in hospitals are threatening. Sometimes, spirits appear in medical settings to provide comfort, to offer guidance, or to ensure that patients receive the care they deserve. The key is learning to distinguish between benevolent spiritual presence and malevolent influence, between healing spirits and predatory ones, between ancestors who want to help and ancestors who want to harm. Emma is now in high school, excelling in her science classes, and still planning to study medicine. She's never asked about her supernatural heritage, but she's shown an unusual ability to comfort distressed patients during her volunteer work at local hospitals. I think she inherited Mary Crane's gift for healing, not Abigail Crane's obsession with death. But I'll be watching, just in case. Because I've learned that some family legacies skip generations, that genetic predispositions toward both healing and harming can lie dormant for decades before manifesting. And I've learned that the price of protection is eternal vigilance. Every day, I go to work knowing that somewhere in the healthcare system, there might be another Abigail Crane, someone using medical authority to harm rather than heal. And every day I choose to be Mary Crane instead, someone who fights to protect patients from those who would abuse their trust. This is my family's true legacy, not the power to choose who lives and who dies, but the responsibility to ensure that those choices are made with compassion, with consent, and with respect for the sacred nature of human life. If you work in healthcare, if you've ever been a patient in a hospital, remember this story. Remember that the people caring for you have enormous power over your life and death. Most of them use that power to heal, but some of them don't. And sometimes, the only thing standing between patients and those who would harm them is someone willing to speak up, to advocate, to fight for what's right. Sometimes, that someone might be you. The next time you see a healthcare worker who seems overly interested in death, who predicts patient outcomes with suspicious accuracy, who seems to take satisfaction in suffering, remember Abigail Crane, and remember that the best way to honor the dead is to protect the living, because healing is a sacred trust, and that trust must never be broken.